between 1900 and present time, Chinese society, and when I say Chinese society, I mean the one in mainland China. Those of us in Malaysia and Singapore are simply following along. So, between 1900 and present time, Chinese society on mainland China has undergone several rounds of makeovers. We have seen, for example, the makeover brought along by Deng Xiaoping, which brought along socialism with Chinese characteristics, which introduced capitalism into Chinese society. However, in today's video, we are going to look at something that ignited and brought an end to the use of literary Chinese and the use of modern standard Mandarin that we know today. Okay, sounds interesting? Let's get into it. So, the topic for today is the new culture movement. You may have heard of it and you may not have heard of it. Anyway, some of you may say that, the modern standard Mandarin was introduced by perhaps the communists. Well, you are partly true, because the communists did not actually start the use of Mandarin. Rather, they take on what has already developed, and that goes all the way back to the new culture movement, which was around 1919. However, the idea that we should replace literary Chinese with a vernacular language, that is to say, the language of the people as it is spoken, rather than to have a separate, different language that is written, that already appears sometime in the turn of the 20th century, because people are already seeing that literary Chinese has met its limitation. It has been used for over 1,000 years. But as we progress into the 20th century, new inventions are coming into the way, such as telecommunication, the invention of telephone and radio. With the invention of telephone and radio, sound can be brought and transmitted over long distances. And when sound can be transmitted into long distances, the language can also go long distances. Up until then, there was no necessity of that, because for China, such a vast country, they have this marvelous invention called literary Chinese. With literary Chinese, even though people of different regions and different provinces were not able to speak to one another, they can do so in written form, because literary Chinese is an invention where the written word Chinese characters can be read by different people in different provinces, even though they do not speak the same vernacular language. So a Cantonese and a Hokkien can both read literary Chinese, each in his own literary reading, even though the Hokkien does not speak Cantonese and the Cantonese does not speak Hokkien, and they do not speak the language of the Mandarin in Beijing. However, this is becoming a limitation towards the 20th century, because devices such as telephone and radio are being invented, and then comes the advent of film and movies. If China were to stay the same as before, all these inventions are going to be bypassed. The Chinese society will be bypassed, because take the telephone for example. A person in Beijing cannot communicate with the person in Canton or in Guangzhou or in Fujian province. They don't speak the same language. And so the Chinese society says that we need something that is to phase out this literary Chinese. But even as they were thinking about it, as I told you, this idea that we need to do something has come along from the turn of the 20th century. But the impetus to make a change was the new culture movement. And the new culture movement itself was brought along by dissatisfaction by the elite intellectuals, When I say the elite intellectuals, once again, it's all men. It's all men. During that time, it's all men and it's men of means. So if you are from a wealthy family, then you can send your son to be educated in literary Chinese. And yeah, you can say that there are universities. But even during that time, schools were not widespread. But this movement is the one that eventually created what I would say more or less as universal literacy in China, as well as schools throughout China. When I say school, I mean schools for everybody, not just schools for the elites. Nevertheless, it was the elites or the intellectuals who were the agent for this change. What happened was that they were dissatisfied when territories belonging to China that China has ceded to Germany, and now Germany is giving over that territory to Japan. This is known as the Shandong problem or Shandong 问题. This area in Shandong is being given by Germany to Japan, and for the Chinese intellectual, they consider this as a big disgrace, and they were so done with the old way of doing things, and so that's why the new culture movement came about. And to tell you more about the new culture movement, we have, of course, the China podcast with James and Jessica, and they will deal with it, and perhaps they will be able to explain it very clearly, and then I will come back and wrap this all up. So over on to James and Jessica.
Wow. We've got a ton of material to go through today.
Yeah.
Our listeners have really given us a lot to think about on this topic.
It's exciting. This is a big one.
It is. So we're diving into the new culture movement in China.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about old books and dusty ideas.
Right.
This thing really reshaped everything, right? Politics, art, the way people spoke.
The whole landscape.
Yeah, even how people thought about being Chinese.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's so compelling about it is that it was born out of a real crisis. It wasn't just ivory tower intellectuals debating abstract concepts.
Right, yeah. So set the scene for us. Early 20th century China. What's going on?
Well, you have the collapse of the Qing dynasty, for one.
Uh-huh.
The new republic is trying to find its footing.
Shaky, yeah.
And you've got these foreign powers kind of circling, waiting to see what happens.
Not a stable situation.
No, not at all. And then, boom, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles just throws gasoline on the fire.
Oh, tell me about it.
Imagine, they basically hand over German-controlled territories in China to Japan.
Oof.
It was a slap in the face, a huge blow to Chinese pride. And that right there is one of the major sparks that ignited the May 4th movement, this huge student-led uprising.
So we've got national humiliation, a yearning for change.
Exactly.
And that's where the new culture movement comes in, right? Like the intellectual earthquake before the political one?
That's a great way to put it. And to really grasp this earthquake, we have to meet some of the figures who shook things up. The sources you provided highlight some pretty major players. Chen Dishu, Hu Shi, Lu Xun, Li Dazhao.
Yeah, these guys were like the rock stars of the intellectual scene.
They were.
But here's the thing, and this is what I find so fascinating. They didn't all agree on the solutions, right? They were coming at it from different angles, different philosophies, different backgrounds even.
Yeah, totally. But they were all united by this deep desire for a new China.
For a better China.
Exactly. And it's that very diversity, that clash of ideas that makes this period so dynamic. Take Chen Duxiu. He co-founded New Youth. It became a platform for so many of the movement's ideas. He was incredibly critical of Confucianism, thought it was holding China back.
Wait, hold on. Confucianism?
Yeah.
Out the window. That's like tossing out the entire rule book for Chinese society. What was his reasoning?
Well, for Chen Duxiu and a lot of others, Confucianism represented this really hierarchical, patriarchal system, one that was resistant to change.
I see.
He thought it stifled individual freedom, critical thinking, the whole 9 yards. He wanted a China that was democratic, scientific, embracing new ideas.
Bold vision. But it seems like he wasn't alone. We have Hu Shi, the language reformer.
Right. What a fascinating figure.
So intrigued by his argument that language itself was a barrier to progress.
Yes. He was all about Baihu, the everyday language that people actually spoke, not that super formal classical Chinese.
Which was pretty much only accessible to, the elite, the scholars,
Exactly. His whole idea was that if you want to empower people, you got to give them the tools to actually understand and engage with ideas, right?
Knowledge for the masses.
And that meant reforming the very language they used to think. It was key to modernizing Chinese culture, he believed.
It makes a lot of sense. It's like trying to have a national conversation about the future when most people can't even understand the language, right?
Totally shuts people out.
And then we have Lu Xun, who, from these sources, I can tell was a powerful writer.
Oh, yeah.
He used his literary talent to really shine a light on, well, the dark side of traditional Chinese society.
He was unflinching.
What was it about his work that made him such a potent voice in this movement?
He didn't hold back. Lu Xun tackled hypocrisy, oppression, the weight of tradition, everything. And he did it in a way that was sharp, provocative.
Like a punch to the gut.
Exactly. He wanted to shake people out of their complacency and inspire them to fight for a better future. And crucially, he wrote in Peh-oe-ji. So his message could actually reach a much wider audience.
It's amazing how these figures, each with their own unique voice, style, approach, they all come together around this shared vision of a new China.
It's remarkable.
And then we have Li Dazhao. He takes things even further, embraces Marxism as the path forward.
Yeah, Li Dazhao was a visionary. He truly believed in the possibility of radical social transformation, saw socialism as the way to create a just and equitable society in China.
Wow. So we've got democracy advocates, language revolutionaries, literary rebels, socialist revolutionaries, all united by this desire to create a new China. What a mix.
And that's just the beginning.
So with these figures shaping the discourse, what were the core principles driving this whole movement for a new China? What were they really fighting for?
I think at its heart, it was about a complete shift, a shift in how Chinese society actually functioned, how people thought, how they talked to each other even.
Yeah, we talked about Chen Duxiu rejecting Confucianism.
Right.
It's kind of wild how they saw it as holding China back.
I mean, for centuries, Confucianism was like the bedrock of Chinese culture.
Exactly.
But they felt it just stifled so much individual expression, critical thinking, you name it. They wanted to replace that rigid hierarchy,
Yeah.
with a system that truly valued individual freedom, equality, things like that.
And then there's the whole language revolution, which is really about access.
Totally.
Access to knowledge, to ideas.
Right. Huxi's push for Baihua, using the language people actually spoke, that was huge. I mean, think about it. If you're going to have this national conversation about the future of your country, everyone needs to be able to understand it, participate in it.
Right. No more keeping the masses in the dark.
Baihua was like this key that unlocked the world of literature, education, political discourse, everything for so many people.
Like throwing open the doors and saying, come on in, everyone.
Exactly. And it wasn't just language. They were also embracing these massive concepts like democracy and science.
Yeah, Mr. Science and Mr. Democracy.
They became these like icons almost.
Yeah, representing the hope for this modern China.
Right. They saw rationality, evidence-based thinking, democratic governance as the solutions to all the corruption and the chaos that was going on.
What I find so cool is that this movement wasn't dogmatic, right? They weren't like, this is the only way, everything else is wrong.
Oh, absolutely not.
They were open to all sorts of ideas.
It was this period of real intellectual ferment. They were reading, discussing, debating everything. Liberalism, Marxism, anarchism, feminism, you name it.
Wow, a real intellectual buffet.
Anything that might help them envision a better China, they were interested in.
So they had these core principles, debating all these big ideas. But how did all this actually change things on the ground?
Yeah.
Like what were the real tangible effects of the new culture movement?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. You can't talk about this movement without talking about the May 4th movement.
Yeah, that was huge.
It was like all that intellectual energy from the new culture movement suddenly explodes into this mass social and political movement.
Wow, so the ideas really ignited a firestorm with May 4th.
They did. And there were so many other areas impacted too. One of the most obvious and lasting was the impact on language and literature. Huxi's advocacy for Baihua, it actually worked.
Really?
Books, newspapers, education, everything started using language that ordinary people could understand.
So they actually changed the way people wrote, the way they learned.
It was a total revolution in Chinese literature.
That's amazing. It's like they democratized literature itself.
They did. And then you have the political landscape. Remember those fault lines we talked about? Different ideologies starting to clash?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that ultimately led to one of the most defining struggles in modern Chinese history, the fight between the nationalists and the communists.
Wow. So two completely different visions for China's future.
Yeah, and the new culture movement, in a way, it provided the intellectual breeding ground for both sides.
So the seeds of this epic clash were sown during this period of intellectual exploration.
It sparked these essential debates about democracy, social justice, the path forward, debates that are still going on today.
It's incredible to think that the New Culture movement, in a way, led to both the triumphs and the tragedies of 20th century China.
It's a powerful reminder that progress is rarely a straight line. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and often comes at a cost.
Now, what about social change? We mentioned feminism emerging during this period. Did that lead to any lasting transformation?
Oh, absolutely. The new culture movement really brought women's issues to the forefront. For the first time, you have intellectuals openly challenging traditional gender roles, advocating for women's rights, all that.
So they really started to chip away at centuries of, well, patriarchy.
They did. And of course, achieving true gender equality was and still is a long and difficult journey, but it's remarkable to see those seeds being planted back then.
Right. And it wasn't just about specific issues like women's rights. This movement really changed the way people thought about society as a whole, right? Their place in the world.
It was a profound shift in perspective. You got to remember, for centuries, China saw itself as the center of the world, the Middle Kingdom.
Yeah, like the one and only.
Exactly. But the new culture movement challenged that Sinocentric worldview. It exposed Chinese intellectuals to all sorts of new ideas and philosophies from the West.
So the idea that China was the center of the universe, that started to crumble.
It did. The new culture movement really helped break down that sense of cultural isolation. It forced a reassessment of China's place in this rapidly changing world.
This must have been mind-blowing for people who had grown up with this very specific and often idealized view of China and its history.
It was a period of incredible excitement, but also disillusionment. It was about embracing new possibilities while confronting some uncomfortable truths about China's weaknesses.
So it's like opening a window and letting in all this fresh air.
Exactly. New perspectives came flooding in. And it created this tension, this push and pull between wanting to be modern, but also wanting to hold on to traditional values.
Trying to find that balance, right?
Exactly. And that quest for a modern Chinese identity, a way to reconcile the past with the present, it continues to this day. You see it in China's politics, its art, its social values, everything.
So in a way, the new culture movement's impact is still unfolding even now.
It is. And it's not just limited to China either. This movement had a ripple effect that went far beyond its borders.
Wait, really? A movement that started in China had global implications.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow, a movement focused on China's internal stuff having a global impact. That's kind of wild.
It really is. For one thing, it really challenged how the West viewed China. You know, before this period, China was often seen through this very, Orientalist lens, right? This exotic, mysterious, and often backwards other.
Oh yeah, totally. Like those old movies with the, inscrutable Chinese characters. So stereotypical.
Exactly. But the new culture movement, with its focus on modern ideas and its critique of traditional Chinese society, it kind of forced Westerners to engage with China on a different level, a more nuanced level.
Like they had to take them seriously.
Yeah, they began to see China as a nation that was also grappling with modernity, just like them.
Not just some mysterious other.
Right. So it wasn't just about China learning from the West anymore.
It was a two-way street.
It was. It was a real turning point for intellectual exchange. The new culture movement sparked this wave of interest in Chinese culture and thought, in academia, the arts, even politics.
It's like China was saying, hey, we've got something to offer this global conversation too.
Exactly. And let's not forget the political implications. The new culture movement embraced democracy and critiqued imperialism. And that resonated with anti-colonial movements all over the world.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Think about India, Vietnam, other countries fighting for independence. The ideas coming out of China gave them a new language, a new framework for resistance.
So it wasn't just about China finding its own place. It was about inspiring others to fight for their own freedom.
It really was. It's important to remember, though, that the new culture movement's influence wasn't always, positive. Sometimes that critique of traditional culture, it led to rejecting valuable parts of Chinese heritage.
All right, sometimes you got to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. And some argue that the movement's focus on Western ideas might have actually contributed to this sense of, cultural inferiority among some Chinese intellectuals.
Like they felt the need to catch up rather than forging their own past.
Yeah. So the legacy of the New Culture movement is complex, it's multifaceted, it's full of contradictions, unintended consequences.
It's messy.
It is. It brought about huge changes, both good and bad. And it's a reminder that even the most well-intentioned movements can have ripple effects that you don't anticipate.
Almost like opening Pandora's box.
That's a great way to put it. You unleash these powerful forces, and you can't always control what happens next.
You never know where they'll go.
And that's why studying history is so important, not just to learn from the past, but to see how it's still shaping us today,
Right, those echoes.
Think about the challenges we face now. Globalization, technology changing so fast, figuring out who we are in this crazy world. These are all issues that those new culture intellectuals were wrestling with over 100 years ago.
Wow, yeah, it's true. I mean, this whole deep dive has really shown me how much power ideas have. The new culture movement wasn't just a blip on the radar. It was like this catalyst for change that's still playing out.
And the lessons from that period, they're more relevant than ever as we try to make sense of the 21st century.
So what's the takeaway for us regular folks trying to figure things out? What can we learn from the new culture movement?
I think one of the biggest things is the power of critical thinking, Those intellectuals weren't afraid to question things, the status quo, old ways of thinking, everything. They dared to imagine a different future.
And that's something we need more of these days.
Absolutely. It's so easy to just go with the flow, accept things as they are.
To just go along.
Right. The new culture movement reminds us that we can question everything, that we should question everything.
And not just authority figures, but also, like, our own assumptions and biases.
That's key. Be open to new ideas. Keep learning. Keep seeking to understand the world around us. It's about recognizing that change is messy, unpredictable, even scary sometimes, but it's also vital for growth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We may not all be intellectuals or revolutionaries, but we can all try to be more curious, more engaged.
And more willing to challenge the status quo, just like those thinkers who dared to dream of a new China over 100 years ago.
Well said. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the new culture movement. It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
And hey, listeners, never underestimate the power of an idea to change the world.
Of the many things that the new culture movement brought along, the most important is a total overhaul of the language used in China. Finally, they settled that they are going to phase out the use of literary Chinese in favor of a language that is written and spoken by people. That is to say, instead of every provinces pronouncing the same Chinese characters in his own way, we want to have the set of Chinese characters with its sentence structure according to the vernacular. That is to say, according to how the people actually speak. So, this was proposed by two intellectuals, Hu Shi and Chen Zhuxiao, and they were successful in the campaign to get this change made over. And after much dispute and negotiation, they finally settled in 1932 to pick the Beijing dialect as the basis for Modern Standard Mandarin. And in the year 1949, for the first time, we hear the term 普通话 being used. But I will get into further details on that in future videos because we want to cover history in a very in-depth way so that when you go through all the different videos, you will have a very comprehensive appreciation of history. And at the same time, everything that I'm sharing with you is work in progress. And I do beg your apologies if at moments I get things wrong, I was incorrect, and if I were incorrect, I would definitely put it in the description if I would discover something to be incorrect. But as far as possible, I try to stay as correct as possible, and I will continue to bring you information. And even as I do that, sometimes we have to revisit what we have already known and even question what is written. After I published my previous last video, somebody told me that yes, the oldest Chinese school in Malaysia and in fact in Southeast Asia is Zhonghua School, which was founded in 1904. So I stand corrected that it's not Zhongling High School. But one strange thing is that I went into Wikipedia and it says that that was the first time Mandarin being used to teach in Malaysia. And what strikes me as strange is that Mandarin, as we know today, has not existed yet. To say that Mandarin was taught in a school in Malaysia, Chonghua School in Penang, which is Sekolah Menengah Jenis Kebangsaan Chonghua Confucian, which is in Penang today, still existing. To say that Mandarin is taught in a school in Malaysia in 1904 strikes me as strange, because Modern Standard Mandarin has not been invented yet. It's almost like telling us that in 1904, peanut butter was served, but peanut butter was only invented in 1932. So sometimes, unless you are so particular about every nitpicky about every part of history, we might miss on that. So I'm not saying that this information is wrong, but this information might not be accurate and it could lead to misunderstanding. I am guessing, and I could be wrong in guessing this, I am guessing that what was taught in 1904 that was called Mandarin is the Beijing dialect. The Beijing dialect, which is Mandarin, but it's the spoken Mandarin. But this spoken Mandarin also has its reading form. The reading form is the literary reading of Mandarin, but it's literary reading of literary Chinese. So I am guessing here that the student back in 1904 in Penang was taught literary Chinese, which was pronounced in Mandarin rather than pronounced in literary Hokkien or literary Cantonese. That is my guess, and I will continue to explore to find out, and if I do find out the information, I will share with you, because this channel is like a continuous work in progress. We want to know, we are interested, we are passionate about our history, and we are not so arrogant as to say that everything we say is always right. Everything that I say is not always right. What I'm sharing to you is something which I learned. And as I learn it, I will share with you. And I hope that I make it easy for you to digest and to accept, so that you will have new ideas as we revisit our history. And also, I hope that through this series of videos, I can ignite conversations. We can start to discuss about our history, because I make it something that we want to talk about. Okay, so that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, please give it a like so that YouTube will show it to more people. We want more people to be passionate about history, as in particular those of us Chinese people in Malaysia and Singapore. Let's be passionate about our history. Let's go into the past to learn about it, and sometimes if it is necessary to, we need to revisit and correct or fine-tune our knowledge of that history, so that we have a better appreciation of it. And if you enjoy everything here, please subscribe also to the Learn Penang Hokkien YouTube channel. There's so much still for us to cover. So that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Kam Sia Lu, Jie Jie.